A single photograph. My daughter, radiant in her white wedding dress, walking down the aisle. A moment every father dreams of. But in my hand, the wedding program felt like a gravestone. It didn't say Cora Kincaid. It said Cora Beaumont. My name erased, replaced by her stepfather's. My heart didn't just break, it shattered. I sat there in a church full of strangers, watching my daughter become someone else's. Before we dive into this heart-wrenching tale of betrayal and unexpected turns, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what's the biggest family secret you've ever uncovered? The organ music swelled, a triumphant, almost mocking fanfare echoing through the vaulted ceilings of St. Jude's. My heart, a drum against my ribs, beat in a rhythm of pure, unadulterated paternal pride. My daughter Cora was about to walk down that aisle, radiant in white, towards the man she loved. I, Reese Kincaid, her father, stood tall among the guests, a smile plastered on my face that felt both genuine and slightly brittle. The last few years had been complicated, but today, all that melted away. Today was about Cora, my little girl. I adjusted the lapel of my suit, my gaze fixed on the double doors at the back of the chapel, waiting for her grand entrance. The air vibrated with anticipation, a beautiful tension that only a wedding can create. I remember thinking in that moment that this was it, the culmination of all my hopes and dreams for her, the fresh start we all deserved. Then the programs were handed out. Thick, cream-colored cardstock, embossed with elegant gold script. My eyes, brimming with happy tears, scanned the cover for her name. Cora Kincaid, I imagined, paired with her fiancé, Brennan Reed. A classic, timeless pairing. But as my thumb brushed the smooth paper, a cold dread began to trickle down my spine, a feeling like ice water seeping into my veins. The letters seemed to swim before my eyes, then sharpened into a stark, undeniable reality. It wasn't Kincaid. It was Cora Beaumont. Beaumont. My breath hitched. Beaumont was Alistair's name, her stepfather. A man who'd entered our lives like a smooth-talking serpent, charming his way into the void I'd unwittingly created after the divorce, slowly, subtly, replacing me. The world seemed to tilt. The joyful organ music became a cacophony, the excited whispers of the guests a buzzing static in my ears. I reread the name again and again, as if the words would rearrange themselves into the familiar Kincaid, if I just wished hard enough. But they didn't. Cora Beaumont. It stared back at me. A silent accusation, a public declaration of erasure. My name, my legacy severed. Right here, in front of everyone. A wave of nausea washed over me. A sickening lurch in my stomach that threatened to spill out into the pristine chapel aisle. My vision blurred. The gilded altar, the smiling faces, all melting into an indistinguishable haze of betrayal. This wasn't just a change of name. This was a deliberate, calculated act. My hand trembled, the program crinkling in my grasp. I felt a surge of disbelief, then a white-hot anger that threatened to consume me. How could she? How could they? Not a word, not a single conversation. She knew how much my name, our family name, meant to me. It wasn't just letters. It was history, a connection to my father, my grandfather, a lineage I'd always hoped she would carry with pride. To drop it, to swap it for Alistair's, a man who had only been in her life for a fraction of mine, felt like a deliberate, cruel amputation. This wasn't just a slight. It was a deep, lacerating wound, inflicted by the very person I loved most. And to find out here at her wedding, surrounded by smiles and celebration, only amplified the sting. The double doors at the back of the chapel creaked open, and a hush fell over the congregation. All eyes turned. My heart, still hammering, now felt hollowed out, an empty chamber echoing with the silence of my shock. She appeared, bathed in the soft light from the stained glass windows, a vision of ethereal beauty. Her smile, radiant and pure, was directed at Brennan, but my gaze was fixed on her, on Cora Beaumont, a stranger in all but face. My daughter, my betrayer. And walking beside her, beaming with an almost unbearable pride, was Alistair. My ex-wife Evelyn sat in the front row, a knowing, almost triumphant look on her face. It was then I knew this wasn't just Cora's decision. This was a conspiracy. And as she began her slow, graceful walk towards the altar, my mind, despite the crushing pain, began to formulate a plan for retribution as elegant and devastating as her betrayal. The sting of that wedding program wasn't the beginning, not truly. It was a climax, the devastating crescendo of a symphony of slights that had begun years earlier, a slow, insidious erosion of my place in Cora's life. After Evelyn and I divorced when Cora was 10, I swore I'd be different. I wouldn't be the distant, work-obsessed father my own had been. I'd be present. I'd be involved. I'd be her rock. Evelyn and I had promised Cora that despite our differences, she would always feel loved, always feel secure. We'd even agreed to live in separate houses in the same town, ensuring easy access, shared holidays, and consistent schooling. I'd taken the smaller, older house, ensuring Evelyn and Cora could stay in the home they knew, even if it meant my own sacrifice. It seemed like a fair trade for my daughter's stability. For a while it worked. Tuesdays and Thursdays were my days, and every other weekend. We'd go to the park, build elaborate Lego castles, and I'd teach her to play chess, patiently explaining the strategy behind each move. Her laughter, bright and clear, was the most precious sound in the world. I remember one summer, we spent weeks restoring an antique wooden rocking horse I'd found at a garage sale. We sanded, painted, and varnished, our hands sticky with glue, our clothes splattered with paint. She'd chosen the colors, a vibrant azure for the body, a shimmering gold for the mane and tail. When we finally finished, she hugged me so tightly, whispering, "You're the best dad ever, Papa." That memory, so vivid and warm, felt like a phantom limb, an ache where something precious used to be. Then Alistair Beaumont entered the picture. He was Evelyn's colleague, a charming, charismatic man with a disarmingly easy smile and a seemingly endless supply of compliments. He swept Evelyn off her feet and, almost imperceptibly, began to sweep Cora along too. At first I was relieved. Evelyn deserved happiness. Cora seemed to like him. He'd bring her little gifts, expensive toys, tickets to concerts I couldn't afford on my divorced dad budget. He coached her soccer team, attended school plays, things I sometimes had to miss due to my demanding job as a structural engineer. I rationalized it. He was just being kind. He was filling a gap. He wasn't replacing me. I tried to maintain my schedule, but increasingly Evelyn would call, "Cora's with Alistair at the amusement park," or "Alistair is taking her to that special exhibit." My time with her began to shrink, nibbled away at the edges. I started to feel like an appointment, a scheduled visitation, rather than an integral part of her everyday life. When I picked her up, she'd be buzzing with stories about Alistair and Mommy. I'd listen, forcing a smile, trying to push back the growing resentment. "Did you tell Alistair about our chess game?" I'd ask, trying to steer the conversation back to us. Sometimes she would, sometimes she'd just shrug, already distracted. The rocking horse, once a cherished symbol of our bond, gathered dust in her room. Alistair, I learned, had bought her a brand new electrically powered miniature convertible. It was faster, shinier, more exciting. The handcrafted gift, the hours of patient work, paled in comparison to instant gratification. The seed of replacement, planted subtly, was beginning to sprout. My concerns grew. I tried to talk to Evelyn, gently at first, about the blurring lines, about maintaining boundaries. She'd dismiss my worries with a wave of her hand. "Reese, don't be ridiculous. Alistair adores Cora. You should be grateful she has another positive male influence. Positive male influence. The word stung. Was I not enough? Was my quiet, consistent presence less valuable than his grand gestures? The fear, once a distant whisper, became a throbbing drumbeat. I saw the shift in Cora's eyes, a subtle preference, a leaning towards Alistair's attention. My name, Kincaid, which I had believed to be etched into her very being, felt increasingly precarious, like a fading ink on a cherished but forgotten letter. And as the day of the wedding approached, a terrifying premonition gnawed at me, a feeling that this ceremony wasn't just about Cora and Brennan. It was about solidifying Alistair's place and erasing mine. The years following Evelyn's marriage to Alistair were a masterclass in emotional gaslighting, a slow, calculated campaign to diminish my role in Cora's life. I tried to fight it, but it was like wrestling smoke. Alistair was always there, always present, always smiling, always seemingly doing the right thing. He'd volunteer at Cora's school events, taking on leadership roles, making himself indispensable. He became the Booster Club president, the field trip chaperone, the parent-teacher association lead. Roles I, with my demanding engineering schedule, often struggled to commit to. I remember seeing him at a school carnival, laughing with Cora as they shared a giant cotton candy, both of them covered in sticky pink fluff. I was standing on the sidelines, having just arrived from a late meeting, feeling like an outsider, observing a perfect family portrait I wasn't part of. Every attempt I made to reconnect on a deeper level felt subtly undermined. I'd plan a father-daughter weekend trip camping, fishing, something to get us back to basics. But then, a week before, Cora would sheepishly call, "Dad, Alistair bought tickets to that new theme park for Saturday. We're going with Mom, can we reschedule?" My heart would sink, but I'd force a cheerful, "Of course, sweetheart, we'll find another time." The other times rarely materialized, or when it did, they felt rushed, a consolation prize rather than a cherished experience. These constant shifts, these subtle rejections, began to chip away at my confidence, making me question if I was truly a good father, if my love was somehow inferior to Alistair's flamboyant generosity. Even our shared history felt like it was being rewritten. Cora started referring to their home as my home, not Mom's house. Photos of Alistair, Evelyn and Cora at various events filled their mantelpiece, while pictures of Cora and me, once proudly displayed, slowly migrated to less prominent spots, eventually disappearing into albums stored away. I remember seeing a picture frame I'd given Cora years ago, engraved with "My daughter, my star," filled not with a photo of us, but with one of her, Evelyn, and Alistair at some beach resort. It was a small thing, but it cut deep, a physical manifestation of my fading presence. It felt like I was being airbrushed out of her narrative, replaced by a more palatable, more convenient version of a father figure. The conversation I dreaded eventually happened. Cora, then 14, came to me, her eyes downcast. "Dad," she began, fiddling with the hem of her shirt, "Alistair is taking me to visit colleges next summer. He knows all about applying for scholarships and stuff." My heart clenched. College visits were supposed to be our thing. I had dreamed of walking alongside her through those ivy-covered campuses, sharing in her excitement, helping her navigate her future. That's wonderful, honey," I managed, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. "But I thought we could go together, too. We could make a road trip out of it." She looked up, her expression a mix of guilt and impatience. "He's just really good at it, Dad. He's been doing all the research with me." It was a polite dismissal, a gentle but firm push to the side. I felt a cold certainty settle in my gut. Alistair wasn't just filling a gap. He was actively usurping my role. He wasn't just a stepfather. He was becoming a father. Evelyn, either oblivious or complicit, offered no resistance. In fact, she often facilitated it, praising Alistair's involvement, comparing his proactive nature to my own perceived shortcomings. "Alistair is so hands-on, Reese," she'd say. a casual comment that felt like a barb. The Kincaid name, my name, the name I had given Cora with such love and expectation, felt like a burden, something she might eventually shed, like an old, ill-fitting coat. I just never imagined she would do it so completely, so publicly, and without a single word of warning, leaving me utterly blindsided on what should have been one of the happiest days of my life. The wedding night was a blur of forced smiles and hollow congratulations. I managed to escape the reception early. The clinking of glasses and joyful chatter a torture to my raw nerves. Driving home, the single highway stretching out before me, a heavy silence filled the car, a stark contrast to the celebratory noise I'd left behind. My mind replayed the day, focusing on every interaction, every glance. Evelyn's smug smile, Alistair's overly solicitous cheer, and Cora's averted gaze when our eyes met, after I'd seen the program. She knew. She had to have known. That thought, cold and sharp, cut deeper than any public humiliation. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, had kept this secret from me, allowed me to walk into that chapel, beaming with pride, only to deliver a gut punch that resonated through generations. Back in my quiet, solitary house, the one I'd chosen so Cora could stay in her childhood home, I poured myself a whiskey. The amber liquid burned going down, but it did little to quell the fire in my gut. I sat in my armchair staring at the framed photos on the mantelpiece. Cora as a toddler, giggling in a sandbox. Cora, gap-toothed, holding up a school art project. Cora, radiant at her high school graduation, proudly wearing her Kincaid sash. Now that sash felt like a cruel joke. I picked up her graduation photo, tracing her smiling face with a trembling finger. What had happened to my Cora, the girl who would confide everything in me, the one who saw me as her hero? Had Alistair and Evelyn truly twisted her perception of me so thoroughly? Or was there something more, something I was missing? A memory surfaced unbidden. A few months ago, Cora had mentioned, almost offhandedly, that Alistair was helping her with some legal stuff related to her future career. At the time, I dismissed it as something minor, perhaps a confidentiality agreement for an internship, something typical for a budding professional. But now, in the harsh light of revelation, those words echoed with a sinister new meaning. Legal stuff. Dropping a last name and taking another. It wasn't a casual decision. It was a legal process. Had Alistair orchestrated it? Had he subtly manipulated Cora, or perhaps outright convinced her, that taking his name would be beneficial for her career, her standing, her future? The thought made my blood run cold. He was a lawyer, known for his cunning and meticulous planning. I remembered a conversation with my sister Clara a few years back. She'd always been wary of Alistair. "Reese," she'd warned, "that man is too smooth. He's always playing a long game. Be careful. He's trying to replace you, not just partner with you." I'd brushed her off, accusing her of being overly dramatic, of not giving Evelyn and Alistair a chance. Now her words returned with chilling clarity. Clara, ever the perceptive one, had seen the slow erosion that I, blinded by my love for Cora and my desperate hope for a peaceful co-parenting relationship, had failed to recognize. The legal stuff now seemed less like a simple task and more like a carefully laid trap. A final, irreversible severing of my ties to my own child. My anger began to morph, shifting from raw hurt to a cold, calculated resolve. This wasn't just about Cora's choice anymore. It was about Alistair's manipulation, Evelyn's complicity, and the deliberate dismantling of my family legacy. They had played a long game and I had been a naive pawn, but no more. As the first rays of dawn crept through my window, painting the room in hues of grey and faint gold, a new purpose ignited within me. The Kincaid name might have been dropped from Cora's marriage certificate, but it wouldn't be dropped from history. This betrayal would not go unanswered. The game, I realized, was far from over. And I, Reese Kincaid, was about to become a player they never saw coming. The weeks following the wedding were a strange blend of public grace and private torment. To the outside world, I maintained a veneer of calm, offering polite congratulations when I ran into wedding guests. Inside, a storm raged. My conversations with Cora were strained, punctuated by awkward silences. I tried once to bring it up gently. "Cora," I began, my voice carefully neutral, "about your name." "Why didn't you tell me?" She'd stiffened, her gaze darting away. "It's just a legal thing, Dad. It made sense. For my career." Her answer felt rehearsed, devoid of genuine emotion, a hollow echo of Alistair's legalistic explanations. It confirmed my darkest suspicions. Alistair's hand was all over this. I knew I couldn't confront him directly, not yet. He was too slippery, too adept at turning situations to his advantage. I needed information, leverage. My first step was subtle. I started digging into Alistair Beaumont's past. Not through overt aggression, but with the quiet persistence of a man meticulously planning a complex engineering project. I used my network, old college friends who were now in various legal and financial fields. A few discreet phone calls, a few favors called in. I wasn't looking for scandal, not initially. I was looking for patterns, for anything that would reveal the man beneath the polished exterior. I remembered Alistair's constant boasts about his achievements, his rapid rise in his law firm. Such swift success often leaves traces, overlooked details. My initial inquiries yielded little beyond what was publicly known. A successful lawyer, active in community, respected. Too perfect, I thought. That's when I remembered a specific conversation I'd overheard Evelyn and Alistair having years ago. Something about a client's estate and a complicated inheritance clause. At the time it had meant nothing to me, just background noise. Now it resonated. Alistair specialized in estate law. It was his bread and butter. Could his ambition extend beyond professional success into something more personal? The thought was unsettling, a tendril of suspicion wrapping around my already wounded heart. I also began to observe Evelyn more closely. She seemed happier, more confident than she had in years. But beneath the surface, I sometimes caught a flicker of something else in her eyes, a tension, a guardedness. Was it guilt or fear? Was she merely complicit, or an active participant in Alistair's machinations? I recalled how easily she dismissed my concerns about Alistair's growing influence, how quickly she'd adopted his narratives. She always seemed to defer to him, to take his side. It painted a picture not of a strong, independent woman, but of someone under a powerful sway. The thought of Cora being caught in that same web made my stomach churn. As I pieced together the fragments, a chilling image began to form. Alistair, not just a successful lawyer, but an architect of shadows, meticulously shaping his environment to serve his own ends. The name change, I realized, was likely more than just a gesture of affection from Cora to her stepfather. It was a strategic move, a way to cement his control, to publicly sever the last visible link between Cora and me, her biological father. The emotional pain was still raw, but a new, colder emotion began to dominate. A grim determination. They had played their hand. Now it was my turn, and I would ensure that when I played mine, the consequences would be far more devastating than a mere name change. My revenge would be slow, precise, and utterly unavoidable. My deep dive into Alistair Beaumont's professional life started yielding more than just public records. My contacts, subtly nudged, began to unearth whispers, rumors that had never quite solidified into accusations, but lingered in the periphery of the legal community. Stories of clients whose complex inheritances seemed to inexplicably favor Alistair's recommendations, or whose wills underwent last-minute amendments just before their passing. Nothing concrete, just a persistent scent of something off. It was like pulling a loose thread on a finely woven tapestry. You don't see the whole picture unravel at once, but you know deep down that the fabric is compromised. I needed that thread, that crucial weak point, to expose the man I now believed was a predator in a tailor-made suit. My focus narrowed to the specific area of estate law where Alistair thrived. I hired a private investigator, a former police detective named Julian Thorne, known for his discretion and relentless pursuit of facts. Thorne was a quiet man, with eyes that seemed to miss nothing. I explained the situation, omitting the emotional specifics of Cora's wedding, focusing instead on my suspicion of professional misconduct against Alistair. Thorne nodded, his gaze steady. Patterns are rarely accidents, Mr. Kincaid, especially with lawyers dealing with large sums. He understood. The hunt was on, not for revenge fueled by emotion, but for justice driven by truth. I gave Thorne a list of names, old clients of Alistair, particularly those with significant assets or unusual will modifications. Simultaneously, I started scrutinizing Evelyn's financial situation since marrying Alistair. My divorce settlement with her had been generous, but not extravagant. Yet her lifestyle had visibly upgraded. Flashier cars, more expensive vacations, renovations to their already upscale home. While Alistair undoubtedly earned a good income, the sheer scale of their spending seemed to exceed even a successful lawyer's salary. It hinted at additional revenue streams, or perhaps a significant inheritance. I remembered Evelyn's family was well off, but not exceptionally so. Had there been a windfall? And if so, from where and how did Alistair play a part? This line of inquiry was far more sensitive, treading dangerously close to accusing my ex-wife of something illicit. As Thorne delved deeper, he uncovered a troubling detail. A wealthy elderly client, Mrs. Lenore Ashworth, who had recently passed away. Her original will, drafted by another firm years prior, left the bulk of her significant estate to a distant wildlife charity. However, just months before her death, a new will surfaced, drafted by Alistair, leaving a substantial portion to a newly formed, vaguely defined community development fund, a fund of which Alistair was a primary trustee. The charity naturally contested the will, but the new document was meticulously crafted, legally airtight and ultimately upheld. It was a clean win for Alistair, a professional triumph. But to me it felt like a cold, calculated manipulation. The pieces were beginning to connect. The legal stuff Cora mentioned, the upgraded lifestyle, Alistair's specialization in estate law, and now the questionable handling of a vulnerable client's estate. It painted a picture of a man who wasn't just skilled but ruthless, a man who saw opportunities where others saw trust. The betrayal by Cora, once a singular searing pain, now felt like a symptom of a larger, more insidious disease. Alistair had been grooming not just Cora, but his entire environment, bending reality to his will. The Kincaid name, removed from Cora, wasn't just a personal slight. It was a final symbolic severing of any ties to a past that didn't include him. My own name, my legacy, felt like it was being erased from her future, and I wouldn't let that stand. The unraveling had begun, and I intended to pull every single thread until his entire carefully constructed world collapsed. Julian Thorne, the private investigator, had a knack for unearthing the uncomfortable truth. His next revelation struck a nerve deeper than I anticipated. Alistair wasn't just a cunning lawyer. He was a strategic opportunist, and his preferred targets, Thorne discovered, were often lonely elderly women with significant assets and few direct heirs. They were vulnerable, easily charmed, and often sought guidance from someone they perceived as trustworthy and authoritative. Alistair, with his polished demeanor and persuasive words, fit the bill perfectly. He offered not just legal advice, but companionship, a listening ear, making them feel seen and valued, slowly gaining their implicit trust. The pattern was disturbingly consistent. A period of intensive counseling and friendship, followed by a significant alteration to their wills, always benefiting a foundation or trust controlled by Alistair, or in some cases, Evelyn. The Ashworth case was just one example. Thorne found two others, less high-profile but equally suspicious. In each instance, the changes were legally sound on paper, but the emotional manipulation behind them felt tangible, a dark undercurrent to the meticulously filed documents. It was a predatory system, operating just within the letter of the law, but violating every spirit of ethical conduct. My disgust grew with every file Thorne delivered. This new information cast Evelyn's lavish spending in an even more sinister light. Was she aware of Alistair's methods, or was she simply enjoying the fruits of his ethically ambiguous labors, choosing willful ignorance over moral accountability? The thought of my ex-wife, a woman I had once loved and trusted, being entangled in such a scheme was deeply unsettling. It made the entire situation with Cora's name change feel less about a daughter's choice and more about a calculated consolidation of power and wealth, a subtle act of social engineering designed to elevate the Beaumont name while burying the Kincaid legacy. My pain at Cora's betrayal was slowly morphing into a cold. Hard resolve to expose this charade, I began to understand Alistair's motivations for cultivating such an intense relationship with Cora. He wasn't just building a family. He was building a narrative where he was the benevolent, successful father figure, a stark contrast to my absent or less available role. By replacing my name with his, he wasn't just claiming Cora. He was symbolically claiming her future, aligning her success, her identity, with his own carefully constructed image. He saw Cora not just as a stepdaughter, but as another asset to be integrated into his expanding empire, another testament to his pervasive influence and control. It made my blood boil to think of my daughter as a pawn in his elaborate game. My emotional rhythm began to shift. The raw grief and anger were still there, but beneath them a steely focus emerged. I wasn't just a heartbroken father anymore. I was a man on a mission. The stakes had escalated far beyond personal pride. This was about justice, about protecting other vulnerable people from Alistair's machinations, and ultimately about reclaiming a truth that had been systematically obscured. The name change, once a crushing blow, now served as a stark reminder of what Alistair was capable of. He had declared war on my family, on my legacy, and now I was ready to declare war on his. The quiet moments of sorrow were now punctuated by sharp, intense bursts of strategizing, of poring over documents, of connecting dots that Alistair had hoped would forever remain scattered. The hunter was becoming the hunted, and Alistair Beaumont had no idea his carefully constructed world was about to be meticulously dismantled. Piece by painful piece, the deeper Julian Thorne dug, the more intricate Alistair Beaumont's web became. He wasn't just preying on the elderly, he was exploiting the very system designed to protect them. Thorne uncovered a series of shell corporations and offshore accounts, meticulously structured to funnel funds from the community development trusts into various real estate ventures and, ultimately, into Alistair and Evelyn's personal accounts. It was sophisticated, bordering on genius in its complexity, leaving just enough plausible deniability to evade easy detection. Alistair was a ghost in the machine, operating within the shadows of legality, leaving no definitive fingerprints for the untrained eye. But Thorne was no untrained eye. He found the patterns, the subtle connections that linked each shadowy entity back to Alistair. The names of the directors on these shell corporations were always obscure, often legal assistants or distant relatives of Alistair, people who would follow his instructions without question. The addresses were virtual offices or innocuous post boxes in different states. It was a masterclass in obfuscation, designed to create layers of separation between Alistair Beaumont the respected lawyer, and the true beneficiary of these ethically dubious transactions. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking, and a cold fury began to burn within me. One particular detail caught my attention. A significant portion of the funds from one of the community development trusts was funneled into a company called Blythe Enterprises. The name struck me. Cora's middle name was Blythe. It was a detail I had shared with Evelyn, a personal choice for our daughter. The coincidence felt too potent, too deliberate. Had Alistair named one of his illicit ventures after my daughter, perhaps as a twisted trophy, a subtle boast of his pervasive influence? Or was it something more? A chilling thought took root. Perhaps Cora unknowingly was being used as a shield, her innocent name lending an air of legitimacy to his schemes. I couldn't shake the feeling that Evelyn was more involved than just being a passive recipient of Alistair's ill-gotten gains. Her background was in financial planning, a detail I had almost forgotten. She had a keen eye for numbers, a meticulous approach to budgeting. Could she have been helping Alistair orchestrate these complex financial maneuvers? The thought of her complicity, of her actively participating in a scheme that not only defrauded vulnerable individuals, but also undermined my own standing as Cora's father, was a bitter pill to swallow. It painted a picture of a betrayal that ran far deeper than a simple divorce. A betrayal of shared values and a moral compass I once believed we both possessed. The quiet moments I had once sought for reflection now became agonizing periods of internal battle. The longing to protect Cora, to expose the truth about Alistair, clashed with the fear of shattering her world, of revealing the dark underbelly of the man she now called father. But the evidence Thorne was accumulating was too damning to ignore. Alistair was not just an opportunist, he was a predator, and his network of deception was vast and meticulously crafted. My revenge, I realized, wouldn't just be about personal vindication. It would be about dismantling a criminal enterprise. The emotional wounds still throbbed, but they were now overshadowed by a powerful, unwavering sense of purpose. The ghost in the machine was about to be exposed, and when the light hit, it would be blinding. The day of the reckoning arrived with a crisp autumn chill, mirroring the cold resolve in my heart. Julian Thorne had compiled an ironclad case, a meticulously documented dossier detailing Alistair Beaumont's fraudulent activities, his exploitation of vulnerable clients, and the intricate financial web that siphoned their inheritances into his personal coffers. The evidence was irrefutable, leaving no room for Alistair's usual smooth deflections. It was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, a testament to Thorne's relentless pursuit of truth. I had given it to the district attorney's office, along with an anonymous tip, to a tenacious investigative journalist known for exposing white-collar crime. The fuse was lit. I chose my moment carefully. Not a public confrontation, not a dramatic scene. Alistair thrived on spectacle, on controlling the narrative. My revenge would be silent, precise, and utterly devastating. I sent an anonymous package to Cora, containing a copy of Thorne's report, redacted to protect the victim's privacy, but clear enough to expose the truth about Blythe Enterprises and Alistair's true nature. I included a single undated photograph, Cora as a little girl, sitting on the rocking horse we'd restored together, her face alight with pure joy. A silent reminder of a past untainted, of a father's genuine love, a stark contrast to the deception she now lived under. The news broke 2 days later. The headlines were sensational, splashed across local and national media. Prominent attorney accused of elaborate elder fraud scheme. Alistair Beaumont implicated in multi-million-dollar inheritance scandal. The story is laid bare. His methods, his shell corporations, his systematic manipulation of vulnerable clients. The Community Development Fund was exposed as a sham, a clever front for his illicit gains. The legal community was in an uproar. His law firm immediately distanced itself, suspending him pending investigation. His carefully constructed facade of respectability crumbled in a single public implosion. I saw Cora that evening. She came to my house unannounced, her eyes red and swollen, holding the package I'd sent her. The rocking horse photo lay on top of the report. Her voice was hoarse, thick with tears. "Dad," she choked out, Is this true?" The pain in her eyes was palpable, a reflection of the shattered world she now inhabited. It was the hardest conversation of my life, seeing her so broken, knowing I was the one who had delivered the blow. But it was a necessary cruelty, a surgical strike to remove the cancer that had infected her life. I didn't gloat, I didn't accuse. I simply laid out the facts, the evidence, the painstaking details Thorne had uncovered. She listened, sometimes interrupting with a heartbroken sob, sometimes just staring blankly, absorbing the enormity of the betrayal. She recognized the names of some of the shell corporations, remembering offhand comments Alistair had made. The truth in all its ugly clarity was undeniable. Her stepfather, the man whose name she had taken, was a fraudster, a predator, a master manipulator. And her mother, Evelyn, was now implicated as a beneficiary of his crimes, facing the prospect of asset forfeiture and potential legal action. The emotional impact was a physical blow to her, a shattering of innocence and trust. The Kincaid name, once a symbol of my fading presence, now stood as a beacon of truth, a silent testament to a father's unwavering fight. The reckoning was complete, but the healing, I knew, had only just begun. The fallout from Alistair Beaumont's exposure was swift and brutal. He was disbarred, his assets frozen, and criminal charges were filed, leading to a highly publicized trial. Evelyn, caught in the crossfire, faced intense scrutiny. Her involvement, though perhaps less direct in the planning, was undeniable in her benefit from his schemes. She was forced to sell their lavish home, the very symbol of their ill-gotten gains, to cover legal fees and restitution. Her once confident demeanor was replaced by a haunted, defeated look. The empire Alistair had meticulously built, and Evelyn had so eagerly enjoyed, crumbled to dust, leaving them with nothing but public shame and legal battles. Cora was devastated. The man she had admired, the man whose name she had so proudly taken, was revealed to be a fraudster. Her mother complicit and now disgraced. Her world, built on what she thought was solid ground, had liquefied beneath her feet. She withdrew, isolating herself, grappling with the profound betrayal. I gave her space, sending quiet texts, occasionally leaving a meal on her doorstep. I knew she needed to process this on her own terms, to confront the uncomfortable truth about the choices she had made and the people she had trusted. The anger and hurt I had felt at her name change were now tempered by a deep, aching empathy for her pain. She was a victim too, albeit one who had unwittingly played a part in her own deception. Slowly, tentatively, Cora began to reach out. Our conversations were no longer strained. They were raw, honest, and often punctuated by tears. She confessed her shame, her regret, her confusion. She admitted that Alistair had subtly pressured her, framing the name change as a strategic career move, a way to align herself with his influential professional network. He had made it seem like a logical, almost necessary step for her future, subtly implying that my name, Kincaid, might be less prestigious in certain circles. The manipulation was clear, a sophisticated mind game that preyed on her youthful ambition and her desire to please the man who seemed so eager to support her. One evening, she arrived at my house carrying a small, heavy box. Inside, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, was the antique wooden rocking horse we'd restored so many years ago. It was dusty, a little worn, but still the vibrant azure and gold we had painted it. "I found it in the back of the garage," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't leave it there." We sat in silence for a long time, just looking at it, the symbol of a pure, untainted past, a silent testament to a bond that had been tested but not broken. It was a powerful, unspoken apology, a recognition of what had been lost, and a quiet hope for what could be rebuilt. The shifting sands of her loyalty and identity were finally settling. The glamour and prestige associated with the Beaumont name had vanished, replaced by the bitter taste of deceit. She saw Alistair for who he truly was, not a benevolent father figure, but a calculating opportunist. And in that same crucible of pain and disillusionment, she saw me, her father, not as a fading memory, but as the steadfast, unwavering presence who had fought for truth, even when it meant exposing uncomfortable realities. The Kincaid name, once carelessly discarded, was now beginning to represent something far more profound: integrity, resilience, and an unbreakable paternal love. The tide had turned, and the journey back to her true self had truly begun. The legal battles surrounding Alistair Beaumont dragged on, but for Cora and me, the focus had shifted from justice to healing. It wasn't an instant fix, not a sudden embrace that wiped away years of pain. It was a slow, deliberate rebuilding, like shoring up a fragile structure against a storm that had already passed. We started with small things: weekly dinners at my house, just us, no distractions. We truly talked about everything and nothing. She recounted her college experiences, her career aspirations, her fears. I shared stories of my youth, my own struggles and triumphs. We were relearning each other, stripping away the layers of misunderstanding and resentment that had accumulated over time. One evening, as we were washing dishes, a comfortable silence settled between us. Then Cora spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "Dad," she said, "I'm changing my name back to Kincaid." The words hung in the air, a profound declaration that echoed the depths of our shared journey. My heart swelled, a warmth spreading through my chest that eclipsed all the past pain. I didn't make a big deal of it, didn't cheer or gloat. I simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her choice, a testament to her reclaiming her true identity. It wasn't about winning. It was about her finding her way home. The decision was hers, freely made, and that made it all the more meaningful. She moved back into her old room at my house temporarily, while she navigated the complexities of her life, including untangling herself from the legal fallout surrounding Alistair. It was strange having her familiar presence in the house again, the scent of her perfume, the sound of her laughter echoing in the halls. It felt like a part of me that had been missing for years had finally returned. We spent weekends restoring the rocking horse again, patching up the chips and faded paint. A symbolic act of mending and renewal. This time there was no pressure, no hidden agendas, just the quiet joy of shared effort and rekindled connection. Evelyn, stripped of her illusions and her wealth, found herself in a precarious position. The legal system, while absolving her of direct fraud, held her accountable for benefiting from ill-gotten gains. She eventually accepted a plea deal, agreeing to cooperate and provide testimony against Alistair, trading information for a lesser sentence. Her world had collapsed, and in the ashes she was forced to confront her own choices, her own complicity. Cora struggled with this, with the bitter reality of her mother's actions, but it was a necessary part of her own healing, of understanding the full extent of the deception that had shaped her life. The wedding, once a symbol of my profound betrayal, became a catalyst for something unexpected, not just revenge but redemption. My initial rage had been a shield, a raw emotion that propelled me forward. But through the painful process of uncovering truth, I found something far more enduring. I found my daughter again. The Kincaid name, once carelessly discarded, was now embraced, not out of obligation, but out of love, respect, and a rediscovered sense of belonging. The quiet rebuilding had begun, and with each passing day the cracks in our foundation were filled, not with cement, but with understanding, forgiveness, and the enduring strength of a father's love. Our story was far from over. It was just starting its true, authentic chapter. Years passed. Alistair Beaumont was eventually convicted and served a lengthy prison sentence, his reputation forever tarnished, his carefully constructed legacy in ruins. Evelyn, after her cooperation, faced a lesser penalty, but the consequences of her choices reshaped her life entirely. She worked to rebuild slowly, quietly, trying to find her own path haunted by the past. The world, once mesmerized by Alistair's charm, now remembered him as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that even the most polished facades can hide the darkest of intentions. The system, once manipulated, had ultimately delivered justice, however imperfectly. Cora Kincaid thrived. She completed her studies, excelling in her chosen field, driven by a quiet determination and an unwavering commitment to integrity. She became a mentor to young women entering her profession, often sharing her story, emphasizing the importance of authenticity and standing firm against manipulation. She married Brennan Reed, the man she loved, in a small, intimate ceremony in my backyard, beneath the shade of the old oak tree where she used to play. There were no elaborate programs, no grand pronouncements, just a heartfelt exchange of vows. And in her new life, she proudly carried the Kincaid name, a symbol not just of her heritage, but of her resilience, her strength, and the truth she had reclaimed. I watched her grow, a profound sense of peace settling over me. The pain of the wedding day, the shock of seeing Cora Beaumont, had faded, replaced by the profound joy of seeing Cora Kincaid flourish. Our bond, once fractured, had not only healed but had grown stronger, forged in the fires of adversity. We were a team, a family, connected by something deeper than just blood, by shared experience, by forgiveness, and by an unbreakable, unspoken understanding. My revenge, once a burning desire for retribution, had evolved into something far more meaningful: the restoration of truth, the protection of my daughter, and the quiet triumph of genuine love over calculated deceit. One crisp autumn afternoon, Cora and her young daughter, my granddaughter Lyra, came to visit. Lyra, a spirited 5-year-old with Cora's bright eyes, immediately made a beeline for the rocking horse, which now held a place of honor in my living room. Cora watched her, a soft smile playing on her lips. "She loves that horse, Dad," she said, her voice filled with warmth. I tell her stories about how we made it together. Lyra, giggling, began to sing a nursery rhyme, her tiny hands gripping the wooden handles, her feet kicking as she imagined herself soaring through the air. As I watched them, my heart full, I realized the true legacy wasn't just in the name, but in the story it now carried. The Kincaid name, once almost lost, now resonated with a powerful narrative of resilience, integrity, and the enduring strength of family. It wasn't about erasing Alistair Beaumont. It was about reaffirming who we were and who Cora truly was. My daughter, who had once unknowingly traded her name for a false promise, had found her way back to her roots, carrying forward a legacy of truth and unwavering love. And in that moment, watching my granddaughter laugh, her bright future unburdened by the shadows of the past, I knew that this closure, this quiet triumph, was more unforgettable than any act of revenge could ever be. It was simply everything. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story moved you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more tales of family betrayal.